I did not scream. I did not cry. I set my fork down on the white porcelain and noticed the slight tremor in my mother's hand as she reached for her wine glass. She had just said it, her voice smooth as the Chardonnay. Your parents gave your boyfriend to your sister. 10 years later, you'll see it was for the best. I had just closed my 12th cross-border acquisition, $4.2 billion in total deal value, and I was sitting in my mother's yellow kitchen in suburban New Jersey, being told that the man I had been dating for 2 years was now engaged to my younger sister. My name is Claire Mitchell. I was 33 years old, and I had been erased again. If you have ever sat in a room where your own blood treated you like an inconvenient stranger, you know the heat that rises in your chest. The urge to correct the record. But I had learned years ago that silence is its own language. I did not argue. I did not plead. I simply pushed back my chair, walked to the front porch, and watched the November sky fade to gray. Tell me what city you're listening from, because if you know that kind of cold, you know why I stayed quiet. If this story resonates, please like and subscribe. Now, let me take you back to how this nightmare started. The world before was a 3-bedroom colonial on Elm Street, with a yellow kitchen that smelled of cinnamon and bleach, and a front porch where my mother, Patricia, held court every Sunday. She would sit in the wicker rocking chair, a glass of lemonade in her hand, and she would catalog our failures in a voice that sounded almost kind. Claire, your hair is too flat, you should use more volume. Claire, that sweater makes you look like a librarian. I wore hand-me-down sweaters from my cousin, the ones with frayed cuffs and faint underarm stains. My sister Emily wore cashmere, twin sets in blush and cream, always pressed, always new. She was the one with the bright career, the one who had potential. I was the dependable one, the invisible fixer, but I was also the one who listened. I heard every whispered phone call my mother took in the mudroom. I saw the way my father, Richard, would nod and glance away when Patricia announced a new plan. His verbal tick was a false promise. One day you'll thank us for being tough. And Emily, with her wide hazel eyes and practice sigh, would offer the same refrain. I never asked for this to happen, Claire. But she never returned the cashmere sweaters. She never declined the engagement ring that was originally intended for me. The only person who saw past the performance was Amara Osai. My mother called her, that odd accountant, because Amara would bring her own calculator to Sunday dinners and ask pointed questions about the family trust. No one in my family knew that Amara had spent 8 years as a forensic accountant for the SEC before she retired to private investigation. She wore sensible shoes and drove a 12-year-old sedan. They thought she was broken. I thought she was the only one who could count. I met Dr. Jonathan Vega at a compliance conference in Geneva, a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses and a quiet manner. He specialized in multi-generational trusts and holding companies. I filed his card in the back of my passport case. I didn't know then that he would become the architect of a structure that would tilt the entire board. On my 16th birthday, my mother gave me a silver charm bracelet with 6 dangling hearts. One for each of us, she said, clasping it around my wrist. I wore it every day for 3 years. Then one afternoon, I noticed that one heart was missing. I counted again. 5. My heart had been removed. I asked Patricia about it. She looked at the bracelet and said, "Oh, it probably fell off, dear. It's just a charm." But the clasp was intact. The chain was whole. The only heart absent was the one that represented me. At Emily's engagement dinner, a photographer took a formal family portrait. When the proofs arrived, I saw that I had been cropped out. Only my shadow remained on the wall behind the couple, a faint gray silhouette where I had been standing. That photograph hung in our living room for 10 years. My mother never replaced it. When I married Alexander, a quiet engineer I met in Zurich, Emily gave me a pair of diamond stud earrings as a wedding gift. I was touched until I had them appraised 3 years later. Cubic zirconia set in 10-karat gold. Value, $85. I kept them in their velvet box, never wore them, but I never threw them away either. They were a measurement. A receipt. The only thing I wore was my grandmother Aliner's gold wedding band. She had passed when I was 21. On her deathbed, she pulled me close and whispered, "The best revenge is a life so full you forget to look back." I took her ring that night. It has never left my right hand. The first fracture came 6 months before the dinner in the yellow kitchen. I was checking my secondary email, an old account I kept for newsletter subscriptions. There was an unread message from my father to his brother, forwarded by accident. In the subject line, Ray, the Mitchell Trust transfer. I clicked. My father had written a summary of a transaction that moved $432,000 from my grandmother's estate into a shell company owned by Emily. The language was clinical. To avoid inheritance tax issues, we will root through the limited liability corporation Patricia set up in Delaware. Claire does not need to be informed, she has her own career. He had signed it with his full name, Richard Mitchell. I did not call, I did not forward the email. I closed the browser, opened a spreadsheet, and began to document. Every discrepancy I could find in the trust documents Amara had photocopied years ago. Every date, every amount, every signature. I did not confront because I had no evidence that would hold yet, but I had a trajectory. I knew that the man I met in Zurich had just accepted a position as CEO of a private equity firm that was actively acquiring mid-market companies in the New Jersey area. I had also kept a folder of every photograph my parents had ever taken of me, the ones where I was half-cropped, out of focus, or erased. I called it archive. That evening, as I sat across from Patricia at the dinner table, I smiled. I did not ask about the trust. I did not mention the $432,000. I simply took a bite of roasted chicken and let the silence settle into her bones. She had no idea that the attorney I met in Geneva was already drafting a trust structure that would make my husband the controlling shareholder of the company that employed my father. No idea that the forensic accountant she mocked was now tracing a trail that led directly to a collapsed real estate development. No idea that the revenge she feared would never come from me, it would come from the natural consequences of her own greed. I began to collect the pieces. They had no idea I was already 3 moves ahead. The grand ballroom at the Beaux Arts Hotel rose around me like a gilded cage. 3 crystal chandeliers hung from the coffered ceiling, each one casting 1,000 fractured lights across the marble floor. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, the Hudson River a dark ribbon beyond the glass. I stood at the entrance in my navy evening gown, gold necklace resting against my collarbone, a Leaner's ring warm on my finger. I had chosen the venue, the caterer, the string quartet, every detail. But I had not chosen the guest list. That had been left to fate. My mother arrived first. Patricia Mitchell swept through the revolving door in a champagne silk dress that cost more than my first car, her hair lacquered into a perfect wave. She scanned the room with that old condescension, her eyes landing on the chandeliers, the flowers, the champagne tower. She did not see me until I was 3 feet away. Then she smiled, a thin, practiced curve. "Claire, you've done well for yourself." The words hung in the air like a test. I watched her left eyelid twitch slightly, a tell she had never learned to control. My father followed, fidgeting with his tie. He wore a charcoal suit that was one size too large, the shoulders pooling at his arms. "One day you'll thank us for being tough," he said, as if the past 10 years had not happened. As if the engagement dinner photograph had never been cropped. And then Emily stepped through the revolving door. She wore a red dress that matched the curtains in our childhood living room, a shade my mother always said was too bold for me. Her husband, the man who had once been mine, walked beside her. He wore a navy suit that fit him perfectly. He had always looked good in navy. Emily's smile was wide, but her eyes were scanning, always scanning, looking for the threat she could not name. I did not move. I let them approach. Let them walk across the marble floor, past the velvet ropes, past the guests who stepped aside. They thought they were arriving at a celebration of my new life. They did not know they were walking into a deposition. The string quartet played Mozart. The champagne flowed. I watched my mother work the room, her voice rising and falling in that familiar cadence. I heard her say my younger daughter and the one with the real career. I heard my father laugh at a joke that was not funny. I saw Emily touch her husband's arm, a gesture that was both possessive and anxious. Then my mother found me again. She stood at the center of the ballroom under the largest chandelier, and she raised her glass. The room quieted. "I want to make a toast," she said, her voice carrying across the marble. "To my daughter Claire, who has finally found her place in the world. 10 years ago, we made a difficult decision, a practical decision. My parents gave your boyfriend to my sister, and I know it was hard, but look at her now. She's successful. She's married. She's hosting this beautiful party." She paused. "Sometimes the hardest choices are the right ones." I did not scream. I did not cry. I set my champagne glass down on a passing tray and noticed the slight, desperate twitch in her left eyelid. I did not respond. I simply looked at her, and then at Emily, and then at my father, and I let the silence stretch until it became its own answer. "And they thought that was the ending," I said to myself. But it was only the middle. I walked through the ballroom, past the guests who whispered and stared, past the string quartet that did not miss a note. I did not look back. I reached the marble foyer, then the elevator, then the parking garage. I sat in the back of my hired car, the engine running, and I pulled out my phone. Amara Ose answered on the first ring. "Claire, I was wondering when you'd call." "I need you to trace the final leg," I said. "The $432,000. I need the paper trail that connects it to the collapse development." "Already have it," she said. "Your father's brother left a voicemail on your old number. Patched him through to yours by mistake. I have the recording." I closed my eyes. "Send it to Dr. Vega. Tell him to proceed with the trust structure." "It's done," she said. "He filed the paperwork this morning. The holding company now controls 73% of the stock in the firm that employs your father." I hung up. Car pulled out of the garage and into the Manhattanite. They had celebrated. They had drunk champagne. They had not known that the chandeliers above them were already dimming. I sat in Dr. Jonathan Vega's office on the 32nd floor of a glass tower overlooking the Hudson. The sky was the color of wet concrete. He placed a manila folder on the table between us, the edges worn, the tab labeled Matter 43 Vega. He did not open it immediately. He waited for me to meet his eyes. "Claire," he said, "I have the full paper trail now. It is not a leak, it is a flood." I nodded. He opened the folder. The first document was a photocopy of a signature page from my grandmother's trust. Patricia Mitchell had signed as trustee, but the handwriting was not hers. The slant was too sharp, the loops too wide. Dr. Vega had sent it to a forensic document examiner. The report, clipped to the back, concluded that the signature had been traced from a canceled check Patricia had written 3 years prior. Forged. Second document, a promissory note for a home equity line of credit on the Elm Street house, $408,000. The signature beside the borrower's name read Claire Mitchell. I had never signed such a note. Dr. Vega had already filed a chain of title search. The lien had been placed without my knowledge. Third document, a series of wire transfers from my grandmother's estate to an account in Delaware, then rerouted to a limited liability corporation controlled by Emily. The total was $273,000 over 6 years. The tax forms had been filed under my Social Security number. My mother had kept a copy of my W-2 from a summer job I worked at 16. Fourth, a loan application submitted to a community bank in New Jersey, listing me as co-borrower. The loan amount was $231,000. The bank had approved it in 2019. I had been living in Zurich at the time. The phone number on the application was my mother's cell. "They used your identity," Dr. Vega said quietly. "They used your credit. They took loans in your name and defaulted on 2 of them. Your credit score is currently 612. It was 816 when you left." I did not scream. I did not cry. I set my hand flat on the table and studied the loops of the forged signature. My mother had always hated my handwriting. She said my C was too angular, too fierce. But here she was, trying to be me. "I have the voicemail from Richard to his brother," I said. "Amara sent it to you?" He nodded. "I have it transcribed. The real estate development that was supposed to pay back the loans, it collapsed in 2021. They lost everything they borrowed. They are now carrying a debt of $916,000, not including interest and penalties. The holding company my firm established now controls the parent entity of your father's employer. They don't know I've already called their board." I closed the folder. "When does the acquisition complete?" "Midnight on the 3rd day after the party." I left his office and walked out into the cold gray evening. The phone in my pocket buzzed. It was my mother. I let it ring 3 times, then answered. "Hello, Mother." "Claire," she said, her voice warm, almost pleased. "I wanted to tell you how lovely the party was. Your husband seems like a very capable man. What did you say his company does again?" "He is a CEO of a private equity firm," I said. "They acquire mid-market companies." "Interesting," she said. "Well, I hope you're finally settling down. Emily and I were talking, and we thought you might want to host a brunch next Sunday. Nothing formal, just family." I said nothing for a moment. I let the silence stretch. "Claire, are you there?" "Yes, Mother, I'm here." "Good, I'll send you the details." She hung up. I saved the call log. I took a screenshot of the time and duration. I added it to the folder Amara had opened on my laptop, the one labeled Archive. The next morning, Emily texted me. The message was long, rambling, and filled with emojis. She thanked me for the party, said she hoped I was happy now, and asked if I could send her the name of my caterer. She signed it, "Love you forever, little sister." I saved the screenshot. Patricia sent a follow-up email to my work address, the one she had never used before. Attached was a photograph of the family at her birthday dinner the previous year. I had not been invited. She wrote, "We missed you. Next time you must come." I saved the attachment and the metadata. If you have ever been erased from a photograph, only to have it sent to you later as a gift, you know the sour weight that settles in your chest. You know the quiet that follows. You know that the person who sent it does not see you, only the space you were supposed to fill. I did not respond. That night, Amara came to my apartment. She brought 3 boxes, one for manila envelopes, one for labeled folders, and one for the digital drives. We worked in silence for 2 hours. She tracked each piece of evidence on a printed log, noting the date, the source, the type. She stamped each envelope with a red number. She checked each drive against a hash list. "You've done this before," I said. She looked up. Her eyes were calm. "I spent 8 years building cases against people much smarter than your mother. The only difference is that your mother thought she was smarter than everyone. She left a trail so wide I could have walked it blindfolded." She opened a folder marked financial frauds. Inside were photocopies of the forged signatures, the loan applications, the wire transfers. Each page had a yellow sticky note with Amara's handwriting. Exhibit A1, Exhibit A2, Exhibit A3. "The holding company," she said, "is designed to look like a routine acquisition. Dr. Vega structured it so that your husband appears as a passive investor. Your name never appears on any document that could be traced back to you. The board of your father's company will sign the sale without knowing who the beneficial owner is until the closing. Then your husband will attend the first board meeting as chair." She handed me a black binder. "This is the final package, signed, notarized, filed with the state." I held it. The weight was heavier than it looked. "One more thing," Amara said. She pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a pair of real diamond stud earrings. "From me, wear them at the closing." I smiled. It was the first time in months. The night before the acquisition, I received one more message. It was from my father. He wrote, "Your mother is planning a big family dinner next month. She wants you to come. I told her you would. One day you'll thank us for being tough." I saved the text. Then I closed my laptop, turned off my phone, and sat in the dark. Elinor's ring was cool against my skin. Somewhere in New Jersey, my mother was pouring wine, my father was nodding, and my sister was planning a brunch they would never host. The stage was set. They just didn't know the curtain had already risen. The family dinner was set for the first Saturday in March. My mother had chosen the venue, a private dining room at the country club where she had held Emily's engagement party a decade earlier. The same room, the same caterer, the same chandelier that had hung above the cropped photograph. I arrived at 7 in the evening. I wore a dark gray dress, simple and clean, with the real diamond studs Amara had given me. Elinor's ring was on my right hand. I carried a leather portfolio, black, unmarked, and nothing else. The dining room was warm. My mother stood at the head of the table, a glass of red wine in her hand, her champagne dress replaced by a deep emerald gown. She was holding court. My father sat to her right, fidgeting with his collar. Emily sat to her left, her husband beside her, the same navy suit, the same fixed smile. There were 10 other guests, aunts, cousins, family friends who had watched me grow up in the margins of their photographs. They smiled at me as I entered, but their eyes were uncertain. They had heard the rumors. They had seen the cropped picture. Patricia raised her glass. "Claire," she said, her voice carrying through the murmurs. "So glad you could join us. I was just telling everyone about your wonderful party, and about your husband's new position. It's so nice that you've finally found stability." The room laughed. I set my portfolio on the table and sat down. Emily leaned across the table. "I never asked for this to happen, Claire," she said softly, "but I'm glad we can all be together." I did not respond. I opened the portfolio. The first item I placed on the white tablecloth was the silver charm bracelet, the one with 5 hearts. I set it beside the bread plate, the empty notch where the 6th heart had been clearly visible under the chandelier light. My mother's smile flickered. The second item was a printed copy of the photograph from Emily's engagement dinner, the one where I had been cropped out. I placed it next to the bracelet. My shadow stretched across the wall behind the couple. "What is this, Claire?" Patricia said, her voice hardening. I did not answer. I reached into the portfolio and removed the velvet box. Inside were the cubic zirconia earrings Emily had given me as a wedding gift, along with the jeweler's appraisal that valued them at $85. I placed the box beside the photograph. "I have documents," I said quietly. 73 pages, signed, notarized, filed with the state. Copies have been sent to the New Jersey Attorney General's office, the Internal Revenue Service, and the board of the company that employs you, father. The room went still. I did not need to describe the documents. I had already handed them to Amara, who had filed them 3 days before. You forged my signature on a $408,000 home equity line of credit, I said, looking at my mother. You opened loans in my name. You used my social security number to file taxes on funds you stole from grandmother's trust. You transferred $432,000 into Emily's shell company. You defaulted on 2 loans in my name, destroying my credit. I turned to Emily. You accepted the money, you wore the cashmere, you took the engagement ring that was meant for me, and you gave me cubic zirconia. Patricia's face was pale. Her left eyelid twitched violently. This is nonsense. You have no proof. I slid a single sheet across the table. It was the voicemail transcript, my father's voice, explaining to his brother how the real estate development had collapsed, how they had lost everything. Richard, Patricia said, her voice sharp. Tell her this is a lie. My father did not speak. He looked at the transcript, then at me, then at his wife. His hands were shaking. One day you'll thank us for being tough, I said, quoting him. Today is not that day. I stood. The chairs scraped against the floor. The guests were silent. The holding company that acquired your employer, father, is controlled by my husband. He will chair the board meeting on Monday. Your employment will be reviewed. The family home has a lien against it that cannot be discharged because the loan was fraudulent. The IRS will be contacting you within the week. The New Jersey Attorney General will be filing charges. I gathered the charm bracelet, the photograph, and the velvet box. I left the transcript on the table. The best revenge is a life so full you forget to look back, I said, but I never forgot, I just waited. I walked out of the dining room. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice rise, sharp and desperate. I did not turn. Amara was waiting in the foyer. She handed me a file folder. The bank called the home equity loan an hour ago. They are starting foreclosure proceedings. The luxury sedan that your father leased will be repossessed tomorrow. Emily's credit cards have been frozen. I nodded. We walked out into the cold March night. My father called me 3 days later. His voice was low, tired. Claire, I know what we did was wrong. I should have stopped her. I was weak. I said nothing. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just saying I know. I listened. Then I said, goodbye, father. I hung up. My mother never called. Emily sent one text. How could you do this to our family? I saved it in the archive. 6 months later, I stood on the rooftop terrace of my penthouse on the Upper West Side. The skyline stretched across the Hudson, the lights of New Jersey glinting in the distance. I held a cup of tea, the steam curling into the warm night air. Eleanor's ring was cool on my finger. I removed it slowly and held it in my palm. The gold was worn smooth from years of wear. I had never taken it off, not in Zurich, not in Manhattan, not even on the night of the party. I walked to the safety deposit box I kept in the bedroom. I opened it, placed the ring on a velvet cushion, and looked at it one last time. It's done, I said to the empty room. You can rest now. I closed the box and returned to the terrace. The city hummed below. If you have ever built a life from the ashes of someone else's cruelty, you know that silence is not surrender. You know that patience is not passivity. 5 hard truths I have learned. First, family loyalty is often just a euphemism for controlling the easiest target. They called me difficult when I refused to disappear. They called me selfish when I stopped giving. Second, silence is not weakness. It is the only weapon that cannot be traced back to you. I never raised my voice, I never threatened. I simply stopped covering for them, and the weight of their own choices crushed them. Third, money is a mirror. It does not change people. It reveals what they already were. My mother did not become greedy when she stole from the trust. She had always been greedy. The money just gave her permission. Fourth, you cannot build a dignified life on someone else's blueprint for your failure. They wanted me to be the invisible sister, the fixer, the one who cleaned up the messes. I refused to stay in that frame. Fifth, true power is not needing anyone to know you have it. They never saw me coming because they never looked for me. They saw the quiet daughter, the dependable one, the girl with the frayed sweaters. They did not see the woman who had closed 12 deals worth $4.2 billion. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that the arc of justice bends toward those who wait. Keep your boundaries strong. Guard your peace, and I will see you in the next.